Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Adam Winters. I'm Joe Gould, and we're starting a new series today, movies based off video games. I don't know if this first movie fits the category, but it is a movie about video games. It is The Wizard from 1989.
Oh, I thought we were watching that movie with young Michael Jackson and Diana Ross. Never
Oh,
seen that.
goodness. I don't think I've heard of that.
The Wiz. The Wiz,
Wiz?
baby. The Wiz.
Okay. All right. I've heard of that.
It's on my bucket list. Never gotten around to
You can. I'll keep my own bucket.
it.
So, Adam, for the viewers or the listeners, this will be probably dropping in March. But for us, this is our first episode after a couple week break for the Christmas holidays and New Year's.
I always, for many years, I associated the Christmas season with being able to get a whole new crop of video games. So, and then I'd be wanting to play them through January as much as I could, even though it's back to school for me.
Yeah, I agree. Because there's a certain point where, like, my son got a whole bunch of action figures this year. At some point, I feel like every true, American boy transitions from action figure Christmases to video game Christmases, and they go digital. And
Well,
even
it doesn't
today,
have to be a
that holds
choice.
true.
You can get both, right? But you're probably right that at various ages, one would dominate over the other.
Yeah, the thing with adults, and I don't know if you put yourself in this category as an
No,
adult,
I don't. No.
is, I still get action figures, but I no longer play with them.
Oh, you got to take them out of the packages, though. Pose them. Take photos of them. That's where the social media views are today.
Well, I think I'm transitioning to that point as I have like a Macho Man Randy Savage in a box staring down at me. Oh, did you do anything fun over the holidays?
Oh, I sat around and did mostly nothing, which is my favorite holiday pastime for the most part. A lot of
There you
football
go.
on TV, and a lot of nights I went to sleep on the couch with the TV on. Of course, I do that anyway. I just did it in my parents' house instead of mine.
Yeah, very underwhelmed with the college football playoffs so far. They're not quite done yet in
That's
recording
fair,
world time.
but there are blowouts in every level of competition, even in the pros, in the
I
NFL
agree.
playoffs.
I think the big lesson that we've learned is I don't know why they ever thought the seeding was correct the way they were doing it.
No, and I think they've definitely learned that lesson.
5 through 8 should not be your final four in any circumstance.
And of course, every single conference champion lost, which used to be the gold standard for crowning a national champion. Win your conference. But it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
Seem to be.
And I will say this also, as of right now, Ohio State has not played the national championship game. And I am not an Ohio State fan, but I feel like they should go ahead and just give them the title. They have earned it. Whooped up on my Vols. They should not have been playing in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
And they killed Oregon.
They did. That was
Then
impressive.
they
Rosie
killed
Bowl.
Texas. So
They didn't kill
at this
them.
point,
They were neck and neck until they pulled away on the back of Jack Sawyer.
well, they pulled away. So my point is, they shouldn't even play the last game. Just give it to Ohio State.
Well, we got to give the Irish a chance. That's
They
in
have
the
no
American
chance.
That's in the Constitution. I'm pretty sure.
I also don't want them rewarded with a $21 million payoff just because they're stubborn and played a weak schedule.
That's the thing. Notre Dame has won this playoff even if they lose the game, because every round they've played in, they have soaked up the entire payday. No splitting with conference people.
Exactly.
Man, what a bank.
My break has been a tale of two cities, so to speak. So the first part, after Christmas, we went to Castle Hot Springs in Arizona, celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary.
All right.
And all-inclusive resort. It was amazing. Amazing. I'm sure we'll go back.
Where'd the kids go?
Her parents.
There you go. All right.
Yeah, they didn't come to that one. And
No.
then we got back, and not too long after, I got the stomach flu. Logan ended up getting it too. I lost 4 pounds
All right.
between 10 o'clock at night and 4 in the morning.
Very impressive. Most people would love that kind of progress in that short amount of time.
Yeah, and that includes drinking 2 bottles of water, sipping in the process. So I'm pretty sure I lost track of the counting, but it was a 10-plus vomit night. What can I say?
Did you actually weigh yourself between 10 at night and 4 in the morning?
I just happened to weigh myself that evening, so that was not a planned one. I was not feeling bad when I weighed myself the first time. It was a very quickly onset thing.
Okay.
And then I did weigh myself the next morning after I was pretty sure I was done throwing up. It was so bad. It was such a violent illness I can only think of one other time in my life where I've experienced such pain. And like, I felt like I had been in a car wreck where I'd had a sledgehammer taken to both of my sides and to my front of my stomach. And it got to the point the second half of the night where I had to lay directly on my back and put my arms like across my chest like the Undertaker would pin people. Because if I stretched my stomach muscles in any direction, it just had a problem. It would start convulsing and it would make me go throw up again. That's how bad it was.
Can I share my most recent upchuck experience? It's actually
Sure.
on theme for the podcast today for video
Okay.
games. I think it was April of 2022 because I was going out on a Tuesday night to watch Sonic the Hedgehog 2 in theaters here locally. And before I was going to do that, I stopped off at Cracker Barrel and I ordered a hamburger steak meal. And it took them a little while to get it out. You know, I ate it pretty quick. Not the whole thing, but enough of it when it came out. Now, my mistake, I don't think was the hamburger steak. When I was in the waiting room, they had Peeps flavored gummies, and I bought a bag or two, and
Wait
I
a
was
second.
munching on those.
You were in the waiting room? Is this a hospital, Cracker Barrel?
What are you talking about? Every Cracker Barrel has that waiting area with the country store section.
I've never heard it called the waiting room.
The country store. There you go. It's the waiting room to me. So I was munching on my Peeps, my gummy Peeps, and I was munching on gummy Peeps through the whole movie, and I greatly enjoyed myself in the movie. I didn't feel bad at all. I drove home, and as soon as I got home, I had a pain, and I wasn't sure which direction it was coming from. When I got in the bathroom, it was kind of both. This explicit content right here. I never felt this kind of confusion before. I had to try to figure out two fronts. You can imagine how badly that all looked and smelled.
So anyone with children knows you always have a trash can available at the toilet.
So I didn't need to quite go to that level, but I had to strategically maneuver, and this lasted all through the night. And it was, I was laying on the floor next to the bathroom so that I wasn't even going to bother getting up again. You know, when it first happened, I thought, okay, I can see all the gummies. Maybe that was just it, but I had to get every bit of those gummies out of my system. So yeah, that was my experience when I went to saw Sonic the Hedgehog 2 in theaters. And over this Christmas, I got to see Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, I hope you laid off the special gummies this time, didn't overindulge.
I have never eaten the Peeps gummies again.
That's hilarious. But anyways, I'm finally feeling better. I've been behind on everything. We actually pushed back the recording one day. I underestimated how much cool stuff was on this Blu-ray, so you'll have to fill in the gaps in some of the extras.
You are talking about the Shout Factory release, which I think was 2019 or 2020.
Yeah, my understanding is all the other releases are probably pretty bare bones.
Yeah, there is a DVD out there. It's sort of standard, universal, I never owned. And yeah, I imagine you're lucky to have a trailer on that.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen this movie all the way through till now. I'd seen parts of it for sure. It would occasionally come on television, but I don't remember seeing it in the video store. Honestly, I think for people our age, which is that, the early 40s, we weren't quite old enough to care or even acknowledge when it came out, I don't think. So
what was the release date on this?
1989. So I would have been 6. You would have been maybe 7.
What month was this?
December. So December 15th, 89. So anyways, I think this would have been, if you couldn't find it at the video store, it's the movie you read about in all the magazines about the video game. And you really wanted to see it, but your access was pretty limited. Had Fred Savage, you assumed it was good. But I don't know, we probably talked about this movie about wanting to watch it for many, many years before we actually had the chance to. So it's almost got a mythological status, I think, in a certain age group.
And at some point, a meme overshadowed the movie for its pop culture familiarity. And that relates to the villain of this movie, Lucas, and his favorite toy that's irrelevant for the actual plot, other than give him a flex. No. The Power Glove. It's so bad. Which I never owned. To this day, I've never owned a Power Glove.
I think I put one on my hand in a pawn shop one time.
Just to see what it felt like.
Video game store site. I don't remember exactly. But no, I think if you're old enough to have seen the movie when it came out, you're a little underwhelmed at the time. And then if you're our age, you're like, man, this movie's got to be amazing. Even though we haven't seen it. Yeah, and I think there's probably a lot of movies that fall in that status where if you're between the ages of 40 and 45, they're just that you hold them in such a high regard, whether you should or shouldn't. And I think this movie fits into that that category.
So this movie is very much two things. It's a Nintendo branded movie, and it's a very much a Universal branded movie. You can't miss the branding for either one of those.
No. And I thought about this. I don't think Nintendo will ever mention this movie again. Probably based off like one plot line.
Well, maybe more.
But like that in the general language. It feels like a Genesis movie, not a Nintendo movie.
Really? How so?
Well, it's a very 80s PG movie, which today would be PG-13.
Yes. I don't even remember when PG-13 was invented, but 80s PG had a much more of an edge to it than you'd think of today.
Yeah, this is the Howard the Duck of Nintendo games. You know, this is Conker's Bad Fur Day, but not quite that. But I mean, it's trying to be.
Well, there is some overlap, I suppose, at different points.
Yeah. Corey's Bad Effin' Day. What can you say?
So who do you think is the protagonist of this movie? Do you think the Fred Savage character, who is Corey Woods?
That's a good question. You got a bunch of people playing off each other in this movie, but they're only playing off like one or two other people.
An ensemble cast, right? That's what you're going for?
Yeah, but you have multiple ensemble cast.
Yes, that's true.
You have the father and the oldest son.
Christian Slater.
You have Corey and
Jimmy.
Really, it's Corey and Haley's playing off each other with Jimmy being there.
That's true. Corey and Jimmy, it's hard to say if they played off each other. They're sort of playing their own game separately together, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so Haley and Corey are playing co-op mode. Corey and Jimmy are going back and forth, maybe.
Corey is trying to unlock the locked content of Jimmy. He's trying to bring out his...
Maybe you could say Corey is the video game player.
Oh.
And Jimmy is the character.
Okay. Jimmy ultimately becomes the hero of the movie, which again, I'd introduced that idea before, that you can have any kind of work of fiction, literature, film, you can have a protagonist and you can have a hero, and they don't have to be the same person. The protagonist drives the story along, but the hero can ultimately resolve the plot tension.
No, I'm with that. I guess to put it in video game terms, you know, Corey needs to move the Triforce to Hyrule. He needs to get the Triforce to Hyrule to unite the people. Jimmy is the Triforce, but the Triforce itself is not really a person.
That's so sexist.
Hey, he brings along Zelda for this ride.
Okay. Yeah, it took a while for the Zelda games to actually incorporate Zelda into the quest.
So not the perfect analogy, but it's almost as if Jimmy's the key. They got to go find the keyhole to save the kingdom, to save the princess, to save the Mushroom Kingdom, however you want to put it. And he unites the families all together, even the bad guy, by getting Jimmy to L.A.
He does. California. That's the driving force of the movie. California, whatever that means.
California.
There you go.
So I guess we could go this two different ways. This movie has a lot of deleted scenes.
A ton.
I don't know if anyone ever knew about until the Shout Factory this came out.
I was shocked. And these are not just longer cuts. These are subplots. These are supporting characters and arcs that were just about dropped. Did you hear that the director said Universal made a contract that they had to produce a 90-minute movie? And that was a hard thing. So it couldn't be, they filmed 2 hours worth, but it needed to be 90 minutes.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why. I think it was even the director said, this is too much, we don't need to do this. And they insisted on it, even though they had a real tight window. So I'm not really sure why they recorded everything, if they kind of knew what they wanted to cut. Now, Roger Ebert, the late great of the Chicago Sun-Times, he called this film a cynical exploitation film with a lot of commercial plugs and insanely overwritten. And another person said it's less a piece of art than a 100-minute advertisement for Nintendo that millions of families paid to see. And if you saw the extra footage, none of that would apply.
Other than Corey being somewhat addicted to Mega Man 2 in his room and wanting to go to the arcade.
Yeah, but you get what I'm saying. Like, there's a lot of backstory of the family that was cut.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest subplot, Corey and his relationship was his dad. And he wants to be acknowledged by his dad so much, who's, I guess, a groundskeeper or landscaping services. Lawnscaping. that even when he's trying to sneak out of the house, he tries to sabotage it so his dad would get mad and tell him to stay home. When the dad doesn't care, Corey even offers to stay home and watch TV with him. And he's like, nope.
Yeah,
Very
and I think
interesting.
not just Corey, but also Nick. He makes the line in the cutscene. My dad's not home, but even when he is, he isn't.
Yeah,
The
that's
idea
true.
that this tragedy that took place, which would have been interesting how they would have introduced the idea of that he's basically disengaged from life. He's got a very similar problem to Jimmy, in all honesty.
Yeah. He does his job, it seems like, but other than that, that's all he does. He has it on autoplay to do his job. And the family only has the one vehicle, the old Silverado, because it's not even fair to quite call her the mother, because she's the second wife of the dad, who's now remarried a new guy. It's an odd little thing because Corey and Nick are the biological sons of the dad, Mr. Woods. What's his name? Mr. Woods. It's fine to call him the dad.
I think it's Sam. Yeah.
Okay. So when he married Christine, is it the new wife, the second wife? So Christine and Sam had two twins, a set of twins, a boy and a girl, Jimmy and Jenny. Is that right? Jennifer,
yeah.
Which is also the name of the actress who plays Haley. So it's going to get confusing. And at some point, Nick was supposed to be watching the twins when they were either a pool or they were by a creek.
They mentioned a river based off the tragic ending.
And Jennifer quickly drowned, just almost suddenly. And Nick wasn't quite watching. And Christine blamed Nick. I guess there's implication she never liked him and Corey much anyway, or at least she never liked Nick much. And because of that, she hated Nick, and her marriage fell apart with Sam. And she's married to the
Mr.
stereotypical
Bateman.
80s movie awful guy.
So Logan, he watched a movie with me. He's our youngest. And he said, that guy's in all those old movies. And I'm like, yep. And he pretty much plays the same character in all of them. But he doesn't even get a first name in this movie. He's just Mr. Bateman.
And oddly enough, he's not the worst person in this movie, which is saying something.
No, in his defense, he's not the biological father of Jimmy. He just knows that their entire family is a mess because of what happened.
Yes.
And he's got this kid who keeps running away from home, who's a liability, and he's an attorney, so he understands liability.
Yes.
And so he's not a very sympathetic figure, but he's not necessarily a bad guy either. Now, they hired the real bad guy. Was it Mr. Putnam? He basically makes money kidnapping runaways and selling them back to their parents.
This is a thing that exists?
And apparently you're allowed to recover one child and not another.
It's like Pokemon.
Yeah.
I only got one Pokeball. I can only take one kid in my car, even though it's a big... He's driving around in that Oldsmobile 88, that red one. Yeah. All of these vehicles get torn up in the course of this film.
They hold up very well. So Corey runs away with Jimmy to California, and Christine and Mr. Bateman hire Mr. Putnam, the bounty hunter, to go find Jimmy, but to not bring Corey back. And that is where Nick and Sam decide they're going to go find both of the children before Mr. Putnam, who needs a better bad guy name, by the way. So they're going to go try to find the kids first.
And it's unclear what Christine is doing for most of this time. She's waiting by the phone to hear from Dork, the bounty hunter.
Yeah. So I will say, setting up the tragedy, a very Gremlins-esque line when Corey's explaining to, I think it was to Haley at the time, about the tragedy. And that, when Jennifer died, she didn't even float down the river. She just died right in front of him. It was like, she didn't even float down the river.
She didn't get to struggle. She just drowned.
But yeah, that'll mess a kid up.
Jimmy was there to see it.
Yeah. Now, we're working under the assumption when this movie starts that Jimmy is on the spectrum, which I don't know if really existed in 1989 in terms of defined terms. But in reality, it's more of a PTSD kind of situation. Like I said, kind of like his father, but in a different kind of way. His father... disengaging from the family.
Shutting down, shutting off everything else.
But when a 9-year-old does it and they don't talk, it just comes across like they're autistic, which you can kind of retroactively put some of that into the character if you want. But I kind of wonder if that was even on the radar when they wrote the script.
There is a psychologist who does an analysis in the special features. Is probably the worst of the special feature content.
Gotta say, getting a psychologist to be willing to go on camera and talk about a movie from 1989 about video games, it's like, I don't really know if that psychologist is the one I want. I didn't see her discuss the script at all.
Yeah. If I remember from the script, the whole idea of Jimmy having a destination in mind, California, that may have been a contribution of the director. I get the writer and the director mixed up in what I heard on the special features. Now, the director is named Holland, not Tom Holland, but Todd Holland, I think. And it may have been the director's idea to put the final scene where they do reach not Los Angeles, not Anaheim, but Jimmy's interpretation of what California means to him. So I guess we can talk about that later.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably talk about it now. The whole middle of this movie is the kids trying to make money off of Jimmy beating people in video games to fund their trip from Utah. Is it Utah?
It's not made super clear, but Mr. Wood's landscaping truck has Utah on the door.
Okay. Yeah, so they're trying to get from Utah to California. They pick up Haley along the way, who's trying to get back to Reno, and which is halfway or most of the way there, I guess. And then again, they're funding their trip, and along the way, you kind of have Smokey and the Bandit kind of scenes between Nick and Sam and Mr. Putnam as they're trying to destroy each other's vehicles and sabotage each other.
Those are great scenes when they fight each other with vehicle-based combat and lawn tools.
Absolutely. And that's really the movie until the very end, or the last 30 minutes or so, when they get to California.
Yep.
Jimmy might say.
Or Universal Studios, to be precise.
Prior to getting there, they do spend about 30 minutes of screen time in Reno between Haley's little trailer and also at a hotel casino area where Jimmy, apparently they had video games there back in the day, where Jimmy's spending his time getting good at about 90 NES games.
Are we ready to talk about the Nintendo Play Choice 10? Because I have some things to say about that in this movie.
Yeah, go for it.
Did you ever play a Nintendo Play Choice 10?
What is that? Remind me. Remind our listeners.
Well, number one, yes, it's an arcade cabinet. It's coin operated. May have 1 to 2 joysticks. It may have 1 to 2 screens, but it exists simply to demonstrate NES ROMs. So it doesn't have game cartridges. It had circuit boards, and you could insert 10 different ones with an NES ROM onto it, and it would emulate them perfectly, just like an NES would, and you would play it using joystick and micro switch button inputs. But when you put the money in it, it would be set on a timer. It doesn't matter how good you do or bad you do, you will play until your time expires. And I'm assuming that could be adjusted ad nauseum, but the minimum that you could set it to would be 2 minutes. So you think about that, a quarter for 2 minutes, and you were given the freedom to switch from any of the 10 NES games you wanted to. But the only arcade game, the only video game they really play in the theatrical cut are different NES Play Choice 10s.
Yeah, so what was your original critique? Or you were asking me a question. What was the question?
Well, the first question was, were you familiar with them? Just now that we've established that.
I don't think our arcades ever had those. I had heard about them, seen them in video or seen them in magazines, that kind of thing, but I don't know if I ever played it. I also owned an NES, so I wasn't going to be spending a quarter for 2 minutes of playtime.
That's a fair critique, by the way. If you own an NES, you're not getting any new experience. You're only hoping there's games on there you don't own that you want to play. Or maybe you just like the novelty of using the joystick if you don't like the NES Advantage or whatever. But this movie, it's an essential plot point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like the idea of it as a preview system, so to speak. I would doubt back in the day that the brand new games would get distributed to the arcades quickly enough for that to be useful. But yeah.
So in this movie, there is a line of dialogue when they meet Lucas in wherever. I don't know if it's Reno. And Lucas says that because his dad owns a restaurant and he's well enough off, he owns all the Nintendo games that exist at that time in the U.S. market. He puts a number on it. 97? Is that what he says?
Something like that.
That's a big plot point. Okay. Because that's the closest this movie comes to creating a montage. Now, in the history of this movie's conception, Universal Studios wanted a video game movie in the vein of The Karate Kid. And you could argue The Karate Kid was a juvenile take on Rocky, 1976. So they want this child prodigy feel-good story where he rises up through the ranks and he wins the championship. But this is where this movie falls way short in a in its attempt at a montage, because they're at this casino in Reno or Vegas, and they set up Jimmy on one play choice 10, while Haley is calling up the Nintendo players hotline for hours and hours, trying to get all the tips she can find. Corey takes the tips to Jimmy to help him figure it out. I just don't know how any of that works. They're trying to familiarize him with every Nintendo game that's been released so that he'll be prepared for anything at the tournament.
Where he plays 2 games.
I guess 3, isn't it? No, you're right. It's only 2 at the tournament. And let me remark on that.
To call this a tournament is a very strong word.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing like Karate Kid. You know, if you think Karate Kid is corny, this is a way cornier version of that, even though it is impressive to look at. So they established pretty early on in the movie, they're at that gas station, the Sinclair, when they meet Haley. There's a play choice 10 there. So the first game Jimmy demonstrates his ability on is the original NES Double Dragon. He got 50,000 on Double Dragon. And then there's a throwaway line that Haley says. She says he's on his second time through Ninja Gaiden, and he hasn't taken a hit yet. And I just want to say, that would be a tremendous feat.
He did not have a full health bar.
Is that the case? From the first level they showed? They only showed the first level, by the way. If he went all the way through Ninja Gaiden, that is tremendous for a first-time player to not get hit.
If you can go through Ninja Gaiden on your first time and beat it twice, I don't know that you really need to prepare for any other games.
I mean, yeah.
Hey, and I just want to point out that I am better at the original Contra than Jimmy was. Just throwing that out there. He took hits.
Get the Falcon. I don't remember. Remind me of the Contra scenes. Some of them were in the cut version, the deleted scenes.
So I think this was in a deleted scene, which I want to discuss one aspect of that in a minute, where they had some arcades in the background, and one of them seemed to be set to Contra. And so as an aside, I don't think you could play the NES version of Contra in the arcade. The arcade version of Contra was different, so just be clear. But there was a few scenes where he's playing and he jumps around and he's invisible for like a little bit, but he gets killed a couple times in Contra. Whether I can't remember if it's deleted scenes or not. The reference to the Falcon, I'm not entirely sure what that is.
The spread gun, yeah, it's the spread guns. They're Falcon shaped.
Okay, that's all of the little things you shoot have the Falcon on them, don't they? And then you find out what's inside.
What's the one that blows up everything on the screen? Is it Falcon shaped? Okay. Get the Falcon.
I don't know if this is worth calling it the Google machine. Red Falcon is the terrorist military organization which acted as the original main antagonist in the Contra series. That's what I thought. So the Falcon is the enemy. So get the Falcons, get the bad guy?
I think they mean the power-ups because they're Falcon shaped. But again, no kid ever called them Falcons. We called them the spread gun or the laser or the flamethrower.
It's because they had letters on them. There was an L for laser. There was an S for spread. F for fire.
The fireball. We didn't call them the Falcon.
People might have called that fire gun something else based off the F, but yeah, never a fan favorite.
Among the games that feature most prominently in this movie, I'd say Double Dragon. You hear the theme song a lot.
Ninja Turtles.
Well, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles original gets a lot of screen time in this game.
I don't think any of the turtle scenes got cut. I think they were all kept, maybe by random chance. And they really make a lot of the water level, which I want to throw out. Back in my heyday, again, much better than Jimmy. His turtles never had a lot of life in that water.
Well, no, you're talking about Christian Slater. Him and his dad, they played Ninja Turtles mostly.
Well, in the montage, Jimmy is playing some turtles, and he's going back and forth between turtles that have no health bar in his water level.
Jimmy ain't all he's cracked up to be.
Nope.
Well, you could argue like a race car driver, he's figuring out the edge limit, figuring out the point where he spins out.
I did win a video game contest back when I was a kid.
You won one as an adult. You beat me at Punch-Out by 1 second. It's very hard for a man of my intelligence to handle.
But I did win the store championship at a Blockbuster, and I was supposed to go do a regional thing, but they never gave me the information. And as an 8-year-old, I didn't ask for it. I never went to round 2.
Yeah, this movie romanticizes video game tournaments, when really they were just kind of fly-by-night whatever. It's like,
oh, yeah.
It's a little bit ironic, too. This movie is built around the idea of a high-score tournament. In all the games, they simulate a high-score contest. But the Nintendo Entertainment System was the console that I think transitioned the industry away from a high-score mentality. into simply completion or whatever it means to complete a game.
I never grew up thinking about high scores. I mean, I really didn't. I thought about, can I get through the game without taking a hit? Could I beat Contra with the pellet gun and never get a power up? Like, that's what I would sit and do.
When you turn that Nintendo console off, most of the games do not save your high score. So why do you worry about it? It's like,
No, it's you could tell Nintendo, they gave their marketing to this movie, but they really had nothing to do with the making of it, and you can tell.
Other than providing the raw materials, and of course, Super Mario Brothers 3 is the showstopper in this film.
Yes, but even that, they kept saying he's got to start over World 2. It's like, it's not World 2, it's World 1 2, and it says World 1 on the screen.
Let me remark on that too. In the theatrical cut, I don't think you ever see level 2. Are we calling it worlds and levels? World 1, level 2, the Green Hill area. Not a Sonic reference.
It would be, Mario Worlds would be, we're World 1, level 2. Like it's 1 dash whatever.
I don't think any of the shots of that show up in the theatrical cut. They are in the deleted scenes, but they're pretty much in World 1-1, World 1-3, the mini fortress, Gorgeous Morge or whatever. The girl in the tournament, she goes to World 1-4 and she dies, the auto scroll level. And Jimmy makes it all the way to Giant Land, World 4, because he used a warp whistle that he found in the mini fortress. Maybe Lucas plays other levels, I don't remember.
I feel like the points they got were just really based off finding the secrets or completing the mini game, and they really didn't get much from the actual level.
Well, if you find the warp whistle, you don't get any score in Mario 3. The level ends. You don't tally anything in a mini fortress. No score tally.
No, it's like I said, I think the scoring system's kind of jacked up, and you can tell that, Nintendo gave them the game to work with, and they gave them some secrets to work with. But beyond that.
Is that the way most people learned about the warp whistle because of this movie?
It's not how I learned about it, because I didn't see the movie.
Well, everybody already knew about everything before I ever started playing Nintendo. That was the saying. You just saw somebody else do it, and you did it too.
Yeah, so I'm an anomaly, I think, in some of this. 1989, 90, 91, 92, like, we didn't have a lot of money. Like, I wasn't buying video game magazines. Like, I'd rent the game from Blockbuster, and I would play it, and I would just play it and play it and play it. So I didn't know about the Contra code or the Konami code until I was 30 years old. So, but in terms of this movie, they advertised it as the first introduction of Super Mario 3 to the world. In reality, it released in Japan a year earlier and was already in all the magazines. So, if you were a Lucas kid, you already knew all the secrets because you just read the magazines. And then you had the blue-collar worker like myself. We just put our hours in. But in the overtime.
I think Wikipedia says Mario 3 was available to rent in the U.S. in June of '89.
That's surprising.
Because it definitely existed already, but in America, it released in March of 1990, something like that. They had the big campaign for the commercials and all that.
Yeah, I knew it had been released in Japan. If it was in U.S. Rental places, I wasn't aware of that, though.
And the Japanese version is a little different from the U.S. because when you get hit, you lose all your power-ups in one hit, which I kind of hate, but the U.S. version altered that.
So I guess we should go ahead and talk about the conclusion of the movie. Jimmy wins, obviously. Throughout the movie, Jimmy, he wanders away from home trying to go to California, but he's always got something with him.
Yes.
He's got a lunchbox.
A pail, as Corey says.
Yeah. And at one point in the movie, they get bullied, and the lunchbox pops open, and we finally see what's in the lunchbox. And it is basically all the family photos that he had with his sister, and the vacations that they took, and all that good stuff. And you kind of realize at that point that lunchbox is tied to the tragedy, which has caused this PTSD/autism. And at the end of the movie, they win the tournament, and you just kind of assume the movie's done. Even though the tournament was never the reason why Jimmy wanted to go to California. Now, in a lot of the cutscenes, Corey views himself as a traveler, which really doesn't come across in the final cut, other than he throws darts at a map. But then at the end of the movie, they're all kind of driving home. Jimmy's
two vehicles.
Two vehicles. You have Jimmy with his mother and what's his name? Mr. Bateman. Yeah. He never got a first name. I get him confused with Mr. Putnam. But they're driving, and then Haley's driving with the rest of the guys. I'm not sure what their plan for her is.
Yeah, and that's left up in the air, isn't it?
Yeah, and they drive by this dinosaur theme park, and Jimmy starts just going, California, something like that. And they pull over.
It's a tourist trap, not a theme park. I mean, it's...
Yeah, you're right. This is like Dinosaur World in Kentucky. And then, which I never think goodness, I never actually had to stop.
They have King Ghidorah there now.
Huh? A real one or like a knockoff?
Well, he's the roadside attraction, the 3-headed monster. They still
Okay.
have the big T-Rex, but knockoff Ghidorah is there too.
Okay. T-Rex was looking rough last time I saw. So, anyways, the other car stops too, and they all chase Jimmy, and he runs inside I'm not sure where he runs into, a little cave-looking area, and he opens his little lunchbox,
Yeah.
and the movie resolves itself by him laying Jennifer to rest in the dinosaur cave.
The photos and the pail.
Yes, basically, his PTSD is cured by leaving her in a happy place, basically. Now, I feel like I understand that he's got PTSD, but if he had verbalized this, or written it down at any point in the last few years, I feel like the family would have been more than willing to make this happen.
I agree. I also had a headcanon theory, thinking about this as being in 1989. And you had this daughter that died at a very young age, and the question of how many photos actually exist of her. So yeah, Jimmy wants to create his little shrine for his sister. But if you're the parents, do you just want to leave the photos there? Or do you want to go back when he's not looking and grab the photos so you can hold on to those?
Well, they might do that.
It begs the question, how many photos of her exist? And if Jimmy has 3 of them.
Well, back in the day, photos all over the place. Everything's digital now. But
Yeah, maybe, but it's not clear how many photos they have. But, well, when Jimmy does that, it reconciles the mother and the dad to the extent where, and the director gave her this line to say, the mom says, Sam, take our boys home, which is a major moment in that.
Oh, yeah, because it's implied in the rest of the movie that even though they're half brothers, she doesn't really claim the other two.
Especially not Nick, because he was there when Jennifer drowned.
Yeah. Such a sad movie in so many ways to be a 90-minute advertisement for Nintendo games and the Power Glove.
Yeah, not even a Nintendo product, the Power Glove. I guess it was licensed, but it was by Mattel, right?
I think so.
Yeah, came in the case.
What racing game was that?
Well, Lucas was doing Rad Racer 1, but there was another racing game that was shown that looked very much like a 16-bit super scroller that Sega might have made. Not Outrun. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, I can't remember if that's that scene or another scene. I'm like, that does not look like a Nintendo NES game.
That's in the casino.
Okay.
It's something not on an NES game, whatever that is.
So one thing that I kind of wonder what they would have done with it. They introduced Jimmy playing video games in a very distinct way in the final cut, which is very different than the way it would have been in the unedited version. You want to walk us through some of that?
Well, in the deleted scenes, he starts on Corey's NES system at his dad's house. He sneaks out, because in the deleted scenes, he actually runs away 2 more times than he would in the theatrical cut. And one of them is going to Mr. Woods' house, where he goes upstairs, and while Corey's sleeping, he loads up the NES and plays it. But
he plays Super Mario 2 and gets to level 7-3 without a warp, as he put it.
Well, there's only 2 stages in that one, so it'd be 7-2, wouldn't it?
Something like that. He was World 7. He got the World 7 without a warp.
In the theatrical cut, I think he only plays on the joystick, on the Play Choice 10.
Yeah, and you do get a lot of false starts with him wanting or thinking about playing a game, but people are looking at him in the joysticks and the arcade stuff. And
in deleted scenes, yeah.
So it's interesting. I don't know if they filmed like what would that later scene of the 50,000 points have looked like if he had already been introduced as a super player.
Yeah, in order to get 50,000, you got to get pretty far in Double Dragon. You got to probably get to at least the forest section.
But you wouldn't have been surprised that he got it if you had gotten to level World 7 of Super Mario 2 in about 2 hours with no warp.
Yeah. And again, I think cutting all that out works very much in the movie's favor, because it makes it this surprise talent he has when he does it in the gas station meeting Haley.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wish they could have kept a lot of the scenes in terms of the father and the oldest son minus Jimmy. Like, I don't think the Jimmy scenes help too much, but some of the other backstory would have helped, I think, a little bit with appreciating the reconciliation between the oldest son and the father as they're, chasing down Jimmy and Corey.
I have a critique of this movie that I'm surprised Nintendo let them put in and it relates to the journey of Nick and Sam, the father and the Christian Slater. So when they're getting their truck fixed up at one point, and they do it a lot, Nick pulls Corey's old NES out of the back of the truck so that he
I
can
know
hook
where
it
you're
up.
going. I know
He
where
can
you're going
hook it
with
up
this.
to the gas station or the service shop TV to play it. And his dad scolds him. He says, well, you just don't ask. You just hook it up. And the Nick says, well, you should know what this is. You bought it for Corey. And then the dad says, I thought it wasn't working. And Nick says, I fixed it. Now, that's what I'm getting at. Is that what you thought I was getting at?
Yes, the idea that a Nintendo system broke, even that you need to blow into a cartridge.
They did not want you fixing it yourself at all. They didn't want you taking it to anybody. How long were
they wouldn't acknowledge that they were broken?
How long were they even willing to service an NES by mail? The Nintendo.
Oh, they would service them for a long time.
But it went to like 2010 or something until they ran out of parts. They were servicing NES units by mail.
Oh, the big thing is not so much a Nintendo thing, but what company is going to allow it to be said on film that their product broke?
Yeah, if they'd explained they only thought it was broken, that would be different. Like they hadn't hooked it up right because they got to read the instructions. No, I was shocked. Yeah, I was shocked. That was in there. I don't know how many other people that bothered.
Well, anyone who knows anything about Nintendo is you can't even get into the system without special tools, which you're not going to find at a random gas station.
Yeah. It makes you wonder what Nick supposedly did to this thing.
Yeah, they got their own custom screwdrivers. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Huh.
We're probably close to wrapping this up, but we have to discuss the scene in the casino where the Mr. Putnam finally is able to grab on to Jimmy. And then you have the most amazing dialogue in the world by Haley. In order to make people think that he's not their parents, it's like, that man grabbed my breast.
He touched, I don't remember if it was singular or plural. He touched my breast, I think is what it said.
Amazing dialogue for 1989. And then later he says on a phone call, and then on the phone call later, he's like, she doesn't even have breast.
Well, and then you'd think that's just a one-off, but that becomes a major plot point later as well, because Putz the bounty hunter captures Jimmy a second time and gets him in a car, right?
Yes, yeah.
Does he take him out of a room or something, or what happens?
He takes him from the trailer. He looks up the address for the girl. I think it's on the same time that they make the phone call that he's talking about it. He gets her address.
It's very Sarah Connor Terminator-like, calling up and asking, how does he know the name of the girl?
Well, I think they had a room at the... So I'm not sure how, but I think they had a room at the casino. I don't know.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
1980s,
probably.
But you can do a lot in 1980s.
And so she calls up. Corey is upset because Putz is taking Jimmy back, and he's going to miss out on the contest, which Corey thinks he's destined to do. And Haley wants to know if Corey really thinks Jimmy's all that good. And he says he's the best around, better than Lucas, who's really good at one level of Rad Racer using a power glove, which is not going to... Corey says, yeah, he's the chosen one or whatever. And so Haley's willing to make a phone call to her connections, which is, again, Mr. Spanky and his fellow truck drivers.
What a name.
Mr. Spanky.
Big black guy named Spanky.
Truck driver who, in his free time, when he's not driving a truck, he goes to a Vegas casino to the arcade section so that he can play Pop-A-Shot in the deleted scenes. That's his way to unwind. He plays Pop-A-Shot in the casino. In
the final cut, really what comes across is he's the Ernest P. Worrell of truck drivers who happens to be black, and he has no real friends, so he's befriended Haley, the little white girl. And it's a very odd dynamic.
Who worked with her father. There is a connection that he and her father...
Well, Ernest always knew the fathers of the children he played with.
That's true. So, but unlike Ernest, when Spanky throws a punch, it's effective.
Yes.
He's not the one getting beat up. Mr. Putz is the one getting his eye blackened.
I'm surprised Nintendo signed off on any of that.
Well, there's Nintendo of America and Nintendo of Japan. I feel like America would have been willing to get a little bit edgier in '89 because in their promotional, they had to make Kirby look mean, right? Anything that looked cute, they had to make it look mean for edgy.
I don't know. I think the Japan Nintendo, I don't know. Which one made Birdo
the gender confused
a boy that dressed
Birdo?
like a girl? Yeah, which one was it?
Well, that was in the US manual, but it was probably a translation of something. Nintendo canonically considers Birdo female now, even though there's more than one Birdo. But in the manual, And I think Birdo was called Ostro. Is that right? Or was that just the in-game credits they
I
mixed
think the
up?
manual is correct. I think it was the screen that had the wrong. I don't know why they had the wrong name there, but
Ostro, Birdo.
no, there's a lot of things back in the old manuals which you're like, what?
Yeah,
The Goombas are former mushrooms, and we're killing them now.
they're hidden in the blocks. And, Bowser is a sorcerer, which they played a little bit with that, but I've never seen it established that Bowser actually knows sorcery. He just uses magic things.
I always wondered if the people who made the manuals, if those got outsourced.
Nah.
I always wondered about that because it never even quite lined up with what you saw on screen.
No.
Like was someone just having fun and say, we're gonna make Birdo gay, whether he was or wasn't.
Gender confused. Yeah. Now it's like they even try to pair Birdo and Yoshi, even though again there's multiple Yoshis, but I guess all of them are presumed to be male. It's weird.
I always considered Yoshi asexual, like American Godzilla.
They just eat enough and they
There's
spit out
eggs.
an egg, or they
The Yoshi
maybe
makes
not.
an egg.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
They eat 5 fruit and they self-fertilize.
yeah, that's fair. I guess Birdo and Yoshi are made for each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you know? We're cracking life's mysteries right here.
Mm.
Cracking eggs.
Mm. So Universal Studios. Do we want to say anything about Universal Studios in this movie?
They bring King Kong at the end.
I love it. Boy, my favorite. I only went on the Orlando ride, and neither one of them exists anymore. I think due to fires in both cases, but also because at one point they inevitably redo the rides to update them, and so I think they have a Peter Jackson era visual King Kong ride. There was nothing that left a bigger impression on me, not Disney World, not anything else at Universal, than an actual animatronic King Kong, seemingly rocking the tram I was riding in while pyrotechnic fire was being set off. That left an impression on me.
Well, probably because it wouldn't pass OSHA regulations today.
Oh, it was wonderful, though. Man, it was the biggest thing.
It is interesting that today you do have Nintendo World or Nintendo Land, where they call it, within Universal Studios theme park stuff.
Right.
But in relation to this movie, other than just having a cool scene there, Universal is really irrelevant to the plot. Just advertising.
Yeah, it was a little bit impressive that Universal allowed them to show off so much backstage footage, which you don't think Disney ever would have done that, given permission to break the magic illusion.
I mean, you think it was real backstage footage or just a set they made to look like
they said it was.
Okay.
They said it was actual film of the backstage area. There were some set pieces there too. Yeah.
So before we get to other stuff, I think we should go ahead and rate this movie. So
Yeah.
out of 5 Power Gloves, what would this rank?
I've gone back and forth on this just because I find so much of it ridiculous and head scratching, but also realize this may have been the best possible way they could have made this movie in 1989. So it gets 3.5 Power Gloves for me because the Power Glove is going to break. So one of them is broken. 4 Power Gloves, but one is broken, so 3.5.
I think I'm good with 3.5 Power Gloves. 3.5 Power Gloves, and you have to blow in the cartridge 3 times. I think I'm good. No, I think it's relatively well done for what it was trying to do. If they had not gotten, what's her name? Jenny Lewis to play Haley, I think this movie would have flopped. You needed a strong person with wit, a good smart ass to go against Fred Savage, and they got one.
Now, it still flopped at the box office.
No, it didn't.
Really?
That's not right. Oh, we'll get that second. I have to look it up. Anyways,
right.
My point is, without that dynamic, without having the strong dynamic between Christian Slater and Beau Bridges, without that casting, this would have been horrible.
And it's competently
Absolutely
filmed.
horrible.
There's a lot of great shots about the moving camera outside a vehicle. Just a lot of good things in that regard. Long shots with child actors where they don't cut away.
I agree. I think it's well made. I think the casting's great, even with Jimmy. You got to get the right kind of kid to play that character. Without the casting, it would have been 1 Power Glove. But it's a good, fun movie, though.
Yeah.
Box office wise, to settle that critique. Now, it started at number 5 with 2.1 million, but it ended up grossing 14.2. It was only a $6 million budget. It also got $6 million in rentals.
Okay.
So it's a success. And plus, who knows what money they got from Nintendo and Universal.
Well, hold on now. There was a line about that somewhere in the special features. I don't think Nintendo gave them any money other than supplies. They might have even... You know how Nintendo is. Nintendo probably found a way to make them pay to make a Nintendo movie.
This is a 90-minute advertisement for Nintendo. I'm sure if they gave money, they got it back in sales.
But I figured Nintendo would make Universal pay them money to put them in the movie.
So let's rephrase that. I would argue that even if Nintendo did not give them money, Nintendo advertised the movie in their publications, so they got free publicity from that relationship. Not sure about the Universal part, but they probably weren't charged to film the last scenes.
Yeah, maybe.
So it would have kept the budget. I mean, honestly, $6 million seems like a pretty low budget for this movie based off the star power and the traveling and just, dealing with children actors who can't work 12-hour days.
Yeah.
So it was a success, relatively.
The reason Universal wanted this movie was because they were having an actor strike coming up. Do you catch anything about that?
Well, I knew that they had a quick turnaround time due to the actor strike, and they needed a quick writer for it, and that's where that guy came in. He did a pretty good job. Pretty complicated movie to be written that quick. It's a TV guy, it sounds like.
Is having child actors one of the ways to circumvent that strike rule, Screen Actors Guild or whatever?
I don't think so, because I think they had to have it done before the strike started.
Okay.
They wouldn't have had the crew either. That's the thing. Like, they're still adults in the movie. The children's part seems like it would make it more difficult because, they can only work 8 hours a day as opposed to the adults who could work typically 12.
And they said they would mostly shoot the adult scenes with the dad and Christian Slater after the kids were off the clock. They would do their stuff.
Yeah. So is there anything else on the extras that stands out? Because like I said, I really barely touched those. I ran out of time. I didn't realize there was going to be like 40 minutes of uncut of extra scenes.
Well, the panel discussions are sometimes hard to hear, but they're interesting enough. They don't have any panel discussions with Fred Savage, even though he's on the documentary. I'd say the documentary is the best.
Yeah, I watched most of that, and I realized it was going to take like the entire time. It sounds like the stuff they used Fred Savage for on the documentary was actually from a panel, like I forget the year, maybe 2008,
2009 or something like that. Yeah.
It's unfortunate that they didn't get him or Haley as part of some interviews,
or Christian Slater even. That'd been interesting. Oh,
he probably doesn't remember.
So they make a big point in the special features. Nintendo gave the production crew 3 prototype Game Boys, which had not been publicly released when this movie was filming. I think that came out in '89, and I don't know why, because I don't remember the Game Boy featuring in this movie, unless it's a cameo in Video Armageddon.
I would not have thought about a Game Boy in this movie if you hadn't just said that. So I don't think there was a Game Boy in the movie.
But the director goes all to town talking about different adults got addicted to these Game Boys on the set, and Christian Slater really, really wanted one of the Game Boys. And so the director says Christian Slater more or less stole his Game Boy.
That's
so there you go. Yeah. It's hard to, it's a little bit surprising when you think about this movie was made before the Game Boy existed. That it puts it into a little bit of perspective.
But I just meant, like, I thought by 1990 Game Boy had been out for a couple of years.
It felt that way. Yeah.
I never enjoyed the original Game Boy. It was just too blurry. So I never really followed that. When the Game Boy Color came out, that's when I got on board with the handheld stuff. I definitely encourage people to get the Shout Factory Blu-ray. It's definitely a win.
Yep.
But I can't speak towards the standard DVDs that might have been in the past. You might be better off streaming as opposed to those. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't afford the Wizard Blu-ray, I think I only paid like $14, so it wasn't that expensive. But
I've seen them on the cheaper side. There's going to be a day when they're all going to spike up in price, but I don't think it's quite yet.
I thought about, like, how many of these things really out there? It's like, was it to be an example of old Goof Troop episode where should I just buy them all so that they're off the market? Like, how many really are there? And then to sell them one by one for $300 each?
No, that's a miserable existence. You don't want to be that guy. That's the kind of mentality that Putz the Bounty Hunter would have.
Well, and I think the key in that situation is you got to get them offloaded prior to the distributor seeing a cash opportunity and releasing another print. But, All right. So next week, Super Mario Brothers, the movie, and we haven't really discussed beyond that. I think it's probably a good spot to wrap up. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the podcast. Be sure to subscribe to us, like us on YouTube, do all those good things, and we will see you guys next week.
Bye-bye.